Here's Mr. MacDonald.
All right, we're going to try and do this thing. You want a joke first?
Yeah.
Tell a joke, right? I actually looked for jokes to stick in this thing, and it's kind of about, founding principles, and I'm like, I'm going to put a joke in there, right? And I mentioned the Irish, so I went to look for Irish jokes, and they're all about drinking, like all of them, right? And some of them you can't say in public. So I was like, well, I can't do that. But there was one, I'll tell you real quick. Bartender looks down the bar and he sees a guest who's been there for a while, walks down and says to him, hey, your glass is empty, would you like another? And the guy says, why would I want another empty glass? That was about the cleanest joke I could find. It depends on what you Google, right? It's always about what you Google.
I got one with a priest and a duck.
We could probably tell that later. We don't have the right kind of drinks for that, I don't think, the priest and the duck joke. So 4 guys are going cross country in a car together. One from Maine, one from New Hampshire, one from Vermont, and one from Massachusetts. And they're going on for a while, and then the guy from Vermont, he rolls down his window, he reaches into a bag between his knees, and he starts throwing bottles of maple syrup out the window. And the other guy's looking at him, and he's like, oh, these things are everywhere in Vermont, I'm tired of them, I gotta get rid of some of them. Right?
May I suggest the microphone is of no value?
No value? I'll just talk louder. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So they're going on for a while, and then the guy from Maine rolls down his window, and he reaches down to a bag between his legs, and he starts throwing potatoes out the window. And they're looking at him, and he's like, these things are everywhere, I'm sick and tired of them. Without blinking his eyes, the guy from New Hampshire pushes the guy from Massachusetts out of the car. That joke predates mandatory seatbelts, I think. My speech is a little bit heavier, but I wasn't sure what to write about. I talked to Kevin about it, and he gave me some suggestions, and we threw some things around, and I couldn't figure out what to write for you guys. So I thought about core values, I thought about the election, I thought about, the uncivil civil war that we're in. And I'd like you to picture July 4th, 1776. 56 men in Philadelphia, sweat on their brows, signing a document that changed the world. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to a daring idea that a people could be free, equal, and self-governing. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that their Creator endows them with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're all familiar. It was a challenge to the divine rule of tyrants and the political will of a distant government. That God did not give them the right to rule, but he gave it to each of us. Because we are all born into this world with the same rights. Natural rights without regard to any demographic characteristic or social construct. It is true that it took some time to overcome centuries of tradition with regard to race and sex and some of these rights. And we could argue that across Western civilization, and even here in America, we still have, or always will have, to do work on both fronts. But at the heart of the matter is that these rights are ours from birth. It was a revolutionary idea. 250 years ago, they had a revolution so that a handful of colonies could try this new idea. Tonight, at your Lincoln Reagan Dinner, we honor that memory and the 2 giants, or at least 2 giants, who are credited with carrying that covenant forward. Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan. Like many of us, these men believe American exceptionalism is real, alive, and worth saving. And it is, and you know it is. On November 5th, 2024, the people in this room, and those like you all across Sullivan County, all over New Hampshire and across the nation, may have saved not only America, but Western civilization. Is it hard to imagine? In Thomas Cahill's How the Irish Saved Civilization, he tells a story about how St. Patrick not only brought Christianity to Ireland, but instilled a sense of literacy and learning that created the conditions for Ireland to become the Isle of Saints and Scholars, and thus preserve Western culture while barbarians were overrunning Europe. Cahill credits Irish monks and scribes with maintaining the record of Western civilization because they copied manuscripts of Greek and Latin writers, both pagan and Christian, while the libraries and learning on the continent were forever lost. There are skeptics when it comes to Cahill's thesis, as there well should be with mine. Did we save America on November 5th, and with it, Western civilization? The jury's still out. Tyranny never rests, and there is so much work yet to be done. Work that will take more years than Donald Trump has to be president. And the world appears to be against us, very much so. There are midterm elections we have to survive, more than one subsequent presidential campaign to weather. It could take more than a decade to fix what is broken, with this lengthy discussion about what broken means and what fixed actually looks like. But November 5th, 2024 was, in my opinion, its own shot heard around the world. Progressives and pundits dismiss it as populism, a peasant's revolt that will in time discover how much it needs those psychopathic narcissists who think they know what's best for us. They are in denial, and we cannot be. In the years leading up to November 5th, 2024, we were staring down the barrel of the elite's cancel culture gun. Our government was the beating heart of the censorship industrial complex. And not just to silence the sorts of people who would show up at a Lincoln Reagan dinner. Everyone who dared to step foot off their carefully curated narrative plantation could be a target. I like to think of it as equity in its true cultural Marxist glory. Nothing could protect you from their wrath. Not money, not gender, not race, not even party affiliation. But thanks to the systemic overreaction to any query about the approved response to the Chinese virus, millions of Americans discovered how little their government cared for not just their opinions, but also for them, their interests, their desires, their very person. The bodily autonomy narrative evaporated with a long list of things. Americans realized they could no longer take for granted. Ordinary, everyday citizens were arrested and fraud-marched out of meetings and events for crimes as heinous as being by yourself, dozens of feet from another living soul, outdoors, without your face covered. There are plenty of examples like this, and while the number of crimes during COVID may never be known, many people who never wanted to pay attention were forced to do exactly that. They saw what we've been preaching for years. It was something of its own enlightenment, but where Americans chose a different path, most of the rest of the Western world continues down this tyrannical rabbit hole. Anti-speech laws, medical tyranny, ESG and DEI, the abandonment of individual rights in free markets. Many so-called Western states, particularly ones that share the tradition of English law that birthed our Constitution and the American Republic, were already sliding toward a bureaucratic tyranny of elites. What's worse, here in the US, certainly here in New Hampshire, we still are only one election away, maybe two, who knows, from an all-out assault on our rights. There is no guarantee that the Trump administration will succeed in fundamentally transforming us away from that America. The roots of corruption run deep, and the political class wants to water them with our blood and treasure. So as hard as we've worked to win from last November, we will need to work harder to stick the landing in 2026 and 2028. And to do that, we have to stick the landing almost every single day. That's what we tried to do at Granite Grok. So whatever you may think of the Grok, and everybody has different opinions, and that's great, because that's what we want, different opinions. Two simple ideas for nearly 2 decades have pretty much been the core of what we do. Defend core Republican principles and founding values, and try to bring the heat every single day. Defend the values, push the values. Since he came down the escalator, Donald Trump shows up every day. Even when he wasn't in office, he was at it every day, in part because his enemies wouldn't leave him alone, but he fought the fight every day. And he doesn't always get it right, and neither will the rest of us. We are all human, but in politics, showing up matters. The American Republic may be down there on the floor where I dropped my thing. I guess I need a bigger bandstand. We'll make it work. The American Republic may well be the last bastion of Western civilization. And while we may not have wanted or asked for the fight, it is ours, and it is not one with which we here in this room are not unfamiliar. New Hampshire is a life raft of sanity and a sea of left-wing nuttery. We are surrounded by states run by hypocrites and troglodytes, net zero nimrods, tax and spenders, groomers, gun grabbers, and Marxists, many of whom have no idea how much Lenin, Stalin, and Mao revered the concept of democracy as the necessary vehicle without which communism was impossible. But democracy is no less a necessary evil of constitutional republic than human beings are a necessary evil of government itself. And every 2 years, we scrabble to keep the political left from letting the air out of the New Hampshire life raft, for they will sink us at the first opportunity and by any means necessary. The fight for America and Western civilization on the world stage looks like that. America is once again the island of sanity on a global political sea. Canada could have turned a corner this week, but did not. In France and Germany, the opposition candidate or party has been sanctioned or banned from running for office. In England, people get arrested because their neighbors were triggered by posts on social media. New Zealand and Australia have been on the same slippery slope for years. But on November 5th, you showed up to save the world in America. Donald Trump and the MAGA movement may not be any more or less perfect than anyone else, but I believe it is the banner under which Western civilization can be saved. Having said that, if things continue as they have in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency, not long from now, we may be looking for a way to include President Trump's name in the title of this dinner. Maybe we'll just call it the Trump Dinner. Much will depend on the next 1,360-ish days to go and what follows the Trump presidency, but things look good, and you have yourselves to thank. Everyone here is responsible for what we have right now and where we are pointed. So I touched on free speech as a pillar of Western civilization, one of the principles or core values we stand on when hawking our brand. That's obviously important because without it, we can't talk up any other values: liberty, free markets, individual responsibility, and self-governance, the obligation to use our freedom wisely so that all can enjoy both the risks and benefits, including the potential of true liberty. Today, as Republicans, we echo Reagan's words inspired by those founders. Government's first duty is to protect the people, not run their lives. We are the party of individual responsibility because the founders knew liberty without virtue was chaos. We defend the Constitution's check on power because we expect and trust citizens to govern themselves. New Hampshire's Daniel Webster captured this idea when he said the Constitution was made to guard the people against the danger of good intentions. And like the founders, we accept that individual responsibility is the price of self-governance. We need to keep government in its lane, to protect our right to property, be it the reasonable and necessary use of our incomes for shared interests, or to keep from being taxed out of our homes. New Hampshire farmers and merchants stood up to British tyranny, so we must fight to preserve those freedoms, not just at election time or when the legislature is in session, but every opportunity. To push back against the petty tyrannies that diminish all of us because they limit what we might accomplish. Ronald Reagan said, "America is too great for small dreams, your dreams." In a nation where everyone can dream big and live free, a nation that, whatever its faults, real or imagined, has lifted more people out of poverty than any other nation ever. What higher moral purpose could there be than to stand across the history of Western civilization to protect the rights of individuals and the exceptional gift that is America? A place where you can find not only your own path out of poverty, but the freedom to decide what that means and when you've arrived. It started 250 years ago. A culture of unity of purpose founded on the rights of individuals. A government whose purpose is not to rule each of us, but to protect our natural rights to decide how to govern ourselves. A foundation on such principles and organizing in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Ronald Reagan's optimism reminded us that America's strength lies in its people, rooted in faith and family. Families that worked the land, raised children, and passed down values. Values that didn't just shape individuals. In the colonies, grassroots communities were the backbone of the revolution. New Hampshire town halls buzzed with debate as citizens organized against British taxes. Committees of correspondence linked towns spreading the call for liberty. People coming together not because the king ordered it, but because they believed in freedom. Today, New Hampshire Republicans keep the spirit alive, knocking on doors, hosting meet and greets, shaping the first-in-the-nation primary. On a national level, the American Revolution forged a shared community. At Valley Forge, soldiers from New Hampshire to Georgia shivered together, starved together, and fought together for one cause. And they didn't have to agree on everything, but they needed to agree on the defense of individual liberty and self-governance. That unity turned the 13 colonies into one nation. Let's skip a page. Abraham Lincoln's resolve preserved the Union, ensuring the founder's vision endured. And as Republicans, we should draw on that unity, rallying around principles like liberty and responsibility. It does not mean we can't disagree, even enthusiastically. Demanding conformity of policy or opinion would be counterproductive to the idea of natural rights, responsibility, and individualism. So our job is not to tell people what to think, but to agree that we must all defend what allows us to disagree. That we are the ideological heirs of those early patriots building coalitions one handshake at a time. And that we honor and defend the preconditions for a civil and free society. Dr. Jordan Peterson likes to discuss how culture is the union of people around a story, and that if chaos is the goal, you must undermine any opportunity to discover or share that story. You rewrite it, you smear it, you use DEI, CRT, the 1619 Project, BLM, Antifa. These all exist as Marxist ideas or militant factions meant to reimagine American exceptionalism to undermine the story that had, until recently, allowed people from all over the globe to coexist on our shores without any talk about diversity or inclusion. But it begs a question: how did we do that? Why did people give up their culture to embrace ours? How did we bring our different baggage to the same land and find a path to imperfect but lasting unity? People from all walks of life and corners of the globe who didn't abandon their culture so much as find a way to make it part of the success of the American story, to come to a place where anyone from anywhere, with hard work, perseverance, and even some luck, can become more than anyone in their family has ever been. It's not perfect. Here in New Hampshire, while we are repeatedly lauded as the freest state on the continent, we have work to do, and not just the political grind of keeping the Democrats from getting their hands on the levers of power. Our courts need to be better. The family court system is an unnecessary disgrace. We are trapped on a regional power grid surrounded by states that have adopted economically debilitating energy policies. Healthcare freedom is improved, but there is much work yet to be done. Our elections are not secure and their integrity is still in question. You might need a village to raise a child, but all you need to bankrupt a town is a school budget. As rising property taxes threaten to drive people from their homes. Keeping the air in that life raft gets increasingly difficult. So what do? We defend our values before all else, and we use them as our guide in all things. Support efforts to cut overreach and regulation that choke free markets and stifle opportunity. Promote responsible policies that reward work and support tax cuts and deregulation so that every granite stater can choose freely how to thrive. Protect our elections with voter ID laws that do not permit out-of-state tuition-paying students to use campus IDs as proof of eligibility to vote. I've never heard that before. And most importantly, give thanks that you live in New Hampshire and America, and think about what you can do each day to support those values, your president, and be prepared to bring the heat every day. Freedom isn't just one generation away from extinction. As President Reagan said, it could be 1 or 2 elections away. And the people who need to understand this most have jobs and families and are not focused on it. Many vote in federal elections, but rarely in town elections, and yet these are the people who turned out for Donald Trump last November. And too many likely think their work is done. Pray that it is. At least a few of us, knowing better, likely had the same hope. But we can't let them go back to sleep. We need them to be inspired, to continue to nudge them and each other awake. Not with histrionics of the left, but the promise of the American founding. Invite them to learn more about how your local county GOP committees represent and defend those values. The promise of free coffee and donuts doesn't hurt either. Join local discussions online, be the calm, sensible voice of reason, and continue to volunteer for candidates who share your ideas and values, and accept that we may have different ideas about how to get there from here, and that's fine, as long as that destination further secures our natural rights for ourselves and our posterity. Lincoln called America the last best hope of Earth. Given how the rest of the Western world has declined, he was more right than perhaps he could possibly know. In his Gettysburg Address, he observed that we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. The government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Prior to November 5th, 2024, America seemed well on our way to becoming a little more than another failed experiment, a blip across history, lost to the overwhelming weight of human nature and its tendency towards tyranny, a land embroiled in an increasingly uncivil civil war. But Americans stood up, you stood up, and we made a choice. We chose a nation with borders, a smaller, more transparent federal government, and equal justice before the law for everyone. We won't get those things we lost back overnight. We may have to settle for half measures to move the ball forward. But we need to make sure we can explain that to people, boy, that's a typo. We can explain to people, and that while we have taken our first steps back toward the path of liberty, it is up to all of us to remain vigilant. As Thomas Paine reminds us, tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, and tyranny never rests, so neither shall we. Thank you.
Do we get to ask questions?
If you want.
Right on back. Be gentle. Welcome come back, Steve.
I'm 5'9". Well, my eyes are still green. I am losing hair. It's because of the hat. I'm not using the hat to hide the hair. The hat caused the hair to go away. Very few people have ever seen me without one. Sorry, go ahead.
So, what is your thoughts on whether or not the Democrats in the state of New Hampshire, even though they're fighting hard, are they losing the battle or no?
I always assume they're winning because it keeps me sharper. And they are relentless, as you all know. They never give up. They are not shy about tearing you down. They will take any opportunity to undermine your work. And so I think it's a good question, because you read a lot about how disorganized they are and how chaotic they are and how they lack a message. And you see them jumping from message to message as things happen in the news cycle. But there's a lot of money on the left, and they can buy order. They pay protesters, and perception matters more than reality. So we need to be very vigilant about exposing that when we can, because economies take a while to turn around. The border is great now. The economy is starting to tick up a little bit. Gas prices have come down. Food prices have stabilized. But they can make a perception through the media, and despite all our advances in new media, it's still those people who thought they were done after they voted on November 5th who are watching those news shows. They haven't disconnected themselves from that yet, and until they do.
I only ask that because of what the polls have been saying, is that they're losing voters, that it's 21% or whatever.
I wouldn't trust the polls.
No, you have to also remember, and no polls are good. I don't think any of them are. But you can use polls to create a perception. Like, you can tell Democrats that people are leaving their party, and that may energize them more. I mean, they've literally done that, right? You create a negative to generate a positive. So I think we just need to be positive and polite, and when we engage on social media and we talk to people in public, they may say something to you, somebody you work with, says something offhand, and you just say, well, this, I heard jobs work in manufacturing, and just some little tidbit to wedge in there, something really neutral to get started. I mean, the people who come at you and get in your face, you can't win them over. But the people who are listening to you talk to them, you can.
Margaret Dry on the Education Policy Administration Committee, and here's the newest thing that we have to fight, and it has to do with perception, is a Democrat during any hearing will say, oh, and the online vote was, 2 people in favor of your good bill, and 100 million to, against it. And that's just the people that sign up online. If you go to Andrew Belinsky's site, he has a little thing, want to talk to your representative? You know, click, here's a one-click thing, all you have to do is press a little button and they generate all the emails. So it's a false
It
sense
is.
of it.
It is,
I
and
don't
we
know
actually
how to fight
found,
it.
somebody sent us something, I don't remember who sent it to me, so I can't give them credit, but they had gone through all the online, you know, I favored this bill thing, and they were from everywhere. There's no mechanism inside the system to make sure that you're from New Hampshire at all, and you can vote as many times as you want. So there were all kinds of crazy names in there, symbols, you know, I mean, so you could basically stuff that ballot. And that's something people don't know, so it's very useful to tell them if it comes up, you know. See, I know you say there's 1,000 people who like this bill, but we've seen people from out of state do it, you know, there's no way to control it. Does it really mean anything? You know,
It's a follow, they never talk about the people that actually come to the committee and make a statement to us, which is what I use as the real the real people who are committed come down and testify. They make a sacrifice to do that rather than 10 seconds online to do it. So, but I just think we need to get that message out. That
Oh, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
we're not running by mob rule because that's where they're coming at us. They're saying, hey, most of you people are against this bill, why are you voting for it?
oh, and then you might just have to defend the bill and its merits. You know, because honestly, I mean, you've been a rep for a while. Everybody who's been a rep knows that you're going to have constituents who don't understand the depth of it. They don't know about the limitations that you have on yourself because you're supposed to, you know, vote based on the Constitution, not just based on whatever bill somebody comes up with. So, you know, sometimes I've said this to people, I don't know how they would do it. I don't have an example, but sometimes you have to explain to people why it's unconstitutional or why it's not a great idea. And you got to kind of find a way to get there, because if you just say it's unconstitutional, they're like, I don't know what that means really. You know, a lot of people just don't get it, nor do they necessarily care. So it's like a message massaging thing. And so every situation is different. You just, I mean, it may just come to you when they kind of come up to you and ask the question. But if you haven't thought about that as a legislator, I always recommend it. You know, think about what you would say to a constituent who came up to you and wanted you to put in a bill for something crazy. And, you know, some people just do it because a constituent asks. And a lot of those bills just end up getting trashed in committee or, you know, but it happens. So what do you say to them? They're still a constituent. They still have an interest. They're still concerned about some issue. And you need to think about how to say that. And as citizens who aren't in the legislature, you may run into it too. So it's, you know, it's one person at a time, it really
Then
is.
there's the other times where you might have a bill that favors a particular group, like senior citizens or veterans or whatever, but, and the intention of the bill is good, but the way it's written is unconstitutional or creates a situation where other people are paying for that service or something. And if you vote against the bill right away, oh, you hate old people, or you hate children, or you hate veterans, or whatever. So we're always put into that position too, where you understand that there's a good intention behind the bill, but it's just not.
Yeah, and it's how do you articulate that? And you're a citizen legislator.
Yeah.
You're a volunteer, you know, and that's the way it should be. But it can be a lot of work. I know you know that. Hi.
On the municipal level, we suffer from the inverse problem. We can't just send an email to everybody on the city council or on the school board. The main avenues that you have for presenting anything are either 3 minutes in front of the school board or 5 minutes in front of the city council. So how can, and you know, in the case of the school board, this is where the vast majority of our money is being spent. So what would you recommend at the local level? I know that, you know, the Democrats and the progressives have a great ground game and can get people to show up at meetings, but what would you recommend that we do
Well,
at the
that's
local
useful. That's useful, and I know you're in Claremont, so that's a hard row to hoe. We tell people that if you have resources like Granite Grok, for example, we don't always get stories to go national, but we can. I mean, I have access to resources, and they choose whether or not to carry the story if I send it to them. Sometimes the best medicine is lots of unwanted attention. So if you can get a story out on social media, on a website, have somebody who knows the issue, who can talk about it for 3 to 5 minutes and just record it and publish it. Get it into community groups, assuming they're not controlled by nut jobs who are then going to delete them and you. And that's very common. And just try to get the message out any way you can. You can write a letter to the editor, but is any media in Claremont going to publish it? Probably not. So you have to go to alternative media. If you have blog site resources that are local, that people read, those are good. If you have access to any kind of local print media that is unbiased, that's good. It's rare, but it's good. And then online resources. So you just need to get people's attention. Maybe you need to go out and talk to folks that, start a group, start a grassroots brush fire, and try to get a bunch of people to show up at a meeting. And you're in Claremont, so that doesn't mean a lot to them. If it's all people wearing rainbows, oh my God, we're so moved, But if you're like, my taxes are going to kill me in 6 minutes, they're like, oh, I'll be dead.
Thank you.
But I'm happy to help anytime I can. Anybody has anything like that? So, yes, sir.
What is your explanation for the simple, not well-known fact that the same voters who vote in mostly Republican at the state level vote in Democrats at the national level? These are the very same voters.
Yes, we have I had a guy who sent me some stuff, and I can't remember his name. Again, it's so much content. A couple of years ago, he called New Hampshire the little red state with the big blue crown, and he did a deep data dive on voting records and turnout, and I don't remember all the details, but one of the biggest problems we have is out-of-state college students voting in New Hampshire. We have had problems with them busing students in from Vermont and Massachusetts to vote in New Hampshire. The voter ID and affidavit laws have gotten better, but until we actually stop them, they live in California, they pay taxes in California, their tuition bill goes to California, but they vote in New Hampshire. Until we stop that, we can't answer that question. Because that might be the answer. The answer might be the out-of-state voting college students who can walk up with a college ID, get a ballot, and vote your budget in a town election. And vote for your candidates for Congress. And vote for your candidates in the State House. And all the college towns are as blue as can be. And some of them have a lot of rural voters who are Republicans. But you can never win. No matter how many independents you turn, they've got 2,000 college students or 10,000 college students that they can get to go to the polls and vote against you. And until we know they actually live here and they deserve to vote here, we really can't answer that question. But I think that's what it is. I think it is all that out-of-state voting that we've allowed for so long. Anybody else?
How do you fix that?
Well, you got to get the voter ID laws fixed. You can't let college students vote here. If you're paying out-of-state tuition and you vote here, you either pay in-state tuition, and we've tried that a couple times, they don't like that, or you don't let them vote. Why are they paying out-of-state college tuition? They're not a resident. If you look at UNH's rules for residency in the state of New Hampshire, if we use those rules for voting, I think we'd fix the problem. But
How do you do it?
you have to keep bringing up bills. You have to get a legislature that'll pass them. You have to get a governor that'll sign them. And then you're going to get lawsuits. They're going to sue you. Yeah.
We've passed several laws to do away with those college kids voting. My understanding, the Democrats have tried to take us to New Hampshire Superior Court, but they lose. So what they do is they take us to federal court in Boston, where it's 2-1 leaning Democrats, and they win every time. And we consistently pass bills, and we consistently get beat in a federal court in Boston by liberal judges. It's got to stop.
It does have to stop. And what we really need is we need the DOJ and the FEC to get involved. We need the federal government under Donald Trump to pressure. One of the first people I met when I started doing this was Ed Nall, and he was the chairman of the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. And one of their biggest things for as long as I knew him before he passed was voter fraud. And he gave up talking to the New Hampshire AG because they didn't want anything to do with it. They don't want to prosecute vote fraud in New Hampshire. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican governor, they've never wanted to do it. Every now and then, they'll roll somebody out, some college student from Massachusetts or some old person who double voted and probably really didn't even realize it, and say, oh look, we're protecting your elections, there's integrity. But if you give them out-of-state lawyers living in Democrat representatives' houses voting in New Hampshire, they don't want to touch it. And there's tons of examples of that. We've published stories about college students from Canada who lived in the assistant AG's house and voted from his address. They were not American citizens, let alone New Hampshire residents, wouldn't touch it.
Well, didn't we have a state rep who was a college?
We had a state rep from
California.
California. He was a college student, I think, at Dartmouth. And during COVID, remember that, they were telling the out-of-state students to vote by mail in New Hampshire. He's going to Stanford now in California for law school. He may have graduated by now. It's been a couple of years. I forget his name. Yeah, we've had out-of-state college kids get elected to town election posts, you know, and they don't do anything about it. And that's part of the problem. The state of New Hampshire does not want to admit to vote fraud. And for years, we thought it was because they might lose the first of the nation primary if they thought like, the elections, there wasn't any integrity. But we haven't proven it, but it seems right. You know, I mean, the Republican Party in general pushes election reform. Nobody else does, so you know, that's where we are. But nobody seems to want to touch this. It's like the redheaded stepchild in the basement. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Is there no 10th Amendment approach to pushing back on this? Don't the
There should
states
be.
control,
Yeah.
you know, and then you would basically confront illicit federal law and push back on it?
Yeah, well, this is state law. It's
Yeah.
just,
Oh, so we'd have to fix the state laws first.
you have to get the state to prosecute. And another problem New Hampshire has is we have a lot of laws, including some ID laws, that don't have any consequences. It's a law, we wrote it, we passed it, it's on the books, but if you break it, nothing happens. So, yes, sir. Yep, go ahead.
May I conclude from your remarks then, in answer to my question, is the Republican problem not a Democratic problem?
Oh, no, it's absolutely a Democrat problem, but the only people who are going to try to fix it are Republicans. So we need to figure out how to get that done as a party, because nobody else is going to do it,
Thank you.
right? And it's, you know, I've written hundreds of articles on it. So. Yes, sir.
I know Vermont, but we were involved on a recount of, what, 4,400 votes? And we were kind of alerted early that
Frame.
when you went through,
No, they're the good guys.
they were the top 5. You know, they had Harris and all the way down through. But they only had Harris, Phil Scott, Bernie Sanders, and Becca Ballot, and nothing down ballot. And when they had 10 Republicans, 10 Democrats, so we got to look through these 4,400. And there wasn't one of those ballots that wasn't folded.
Yeah.
They were all mail-in ballots that had those top 5. I mean, there's no way to prove it's wrong, but that's a huge.
It has been, and thankfully we didn't get another repeat of COVID, and they couldn't use that as an excuse to do mail-in ballots, but so many people do them now.
You guys got rid of it?
Yeah. You can still do it.
Oh, I thought you were, oh,
So
No.
that doesn't go now?
no. It wasn't mandatory.
You can request, I mean, we call it absentee ballots and mail-in ballots, but it's the same thing, really. You have to request one from your town clerk, right? And then, you know, there's a deadline, and I think the deadline's pretty much been honored if you're late. I haven't heard stories of late ballots getting counted. Recounts is an issue here. All of last year, we did a series of posts on ballot box integrity. So you'd get completed ballots, you'd get them in a box, they get taped, there's a procedure, the Secretary of State has a manual, you go through all that. And the tape they were using wasn't security tape. You could take the tape off, you could do whatever you wanted with the ballots, retape the box, and nobody would know. Right, so activists did this work. I didn't do it, they did it, and they sent it to me, and I just broadcast it. So we got them to switch the tape. We got them to use tape that is tamper-proof. So in order for that tamper-proof tape to work, you have to change the procedure. The old procedure was you could put clear tape on the box, and then put the security tape on the box, and then put the label on the box, and write on the label, and you were all good. But if you peel off the clear tape and the security tape and put them all back on, nobody can tell, right? You can't tell. If you replace everything, nobody knows they were tampered with. They did the exact same thing with the new tape. The new tape, when you peel it off, you can tell it was peeled off, but they still put this clear tape down first. So you can literally peel the clear tape off the box with the security tape, meddle with the balance all you want, and put it back. They watered down the custody, the chain of custody documentation. I'm like, why are we doing this? You know, and I'm sending letters to them, I'm explaining to them. They have lawyers. I'm telling them, I go, this is what it says and you're not doing that. Oh no, this and this. God, you know, it's like they don't want to fix it. They don't want it to be right. And it's very frustrating. And again, it will take Republicans in the legislature to go in. I mean, I haven't seen a governor yet that cares either. Maybe Kelly's it. I don't know, but she's been around a while. She didn't prosecute voter fraud when John Lynch was governor, so I'm not sure. You know? I'm sorry, that's so depressing. What a downer. Trump dance.
Okay, so tell us some good news. Let's end with some good news.
Well, Donald Trump is president of the United States. Better than that, right? First 100 days gone pretty good. He's shocking, awing them. No sign of stopping. I think they have a plan for all the judges that are passing all this stuff and, you know, national injunctions. I think they had a plan for that. They obviously had a plan because coming in, we were like, okay, cool. And then they started doing this stuff. I mean, everybody says Trump plays 3D chess. I mean, I think they sat down and figured it all out in advance before he ever got there. Yeah. Before he was even elected. They walked in and they had something like 1,000 people already in offices and staffers in places where everybody was leaking before. I mean, they literally were prepared. So every time something comes out, I'm like, all right, what's he thinking about? You know, where's this going to go? And so everybody had to know there would be local judges who would issue federal injunctions and that they would have to deal with it. Will it survive the Supreme Court? I don't know. But I think that it's as good a shot as we've gotten in a long, long time. I'm not kidding. I really think that this is our chance to save Western civilization. If America can become America again, then we are an example, whether anybody else comes with us or not. Because when America's working, we can't beat it. Our economy is the best in the world. You know, all the innovation, all the money and investment will come here. What's wrong with that? You know, that's awesome news. Anything else?
Thank you.